Hey guys, so what I originally intended to do for this week's video is to go through a list of 10 of my suggestions for very useful everyday French verbs and expressions. But once I'd recorded it all, I found that it was just too long for one video and I didn't want to sacrifice detail and therefore quality for duration. So what I've done is I split it into 2 weeks worth of videos. Today we'll go through 5 and next week we'll go through 5. So I hope you get something good out of the video, but without further ado, let's get into it. There are so many useful French verbs and expressions that the French use themselves in everyday conversations that we just don't have covered in our textbooks and courses. So if you're like me and you want to primarily learn to speak the everyday language that the French speak themselves, then stay tuned because I'm going to go through 10 of my favorite suggestions for verbs and expressions that you can use to impress your French friends and sound a little or even a lot more French right away. So let's get into it. Salut tout le monde, my name is Alex and I'm an English guy living in Montpellier in the sunny south of France. For the last few years I have learned the French language through self-study and being exposed to the language every day by being here in France. So on my channel you find tips and tricks on useful everyday informal French language and also how to learn in a fun and efficient way so you see improvements regularly and consistently. If you like my content, please consider subscribing by clicking the subscribe button and of course share my channel with anyone you think would get value from it. But on to today's video, and in no particular order, let's go into 10 of my suggestions for useful French verbs and expressions. The first verb I'm going to talk about is se dire. Se dire, and I'm going to talk primarily about 2 uses. The first one is when you want to ask a French person if what you've just said is said, if it is something that not only makes sense to them, but is actually said by French people themselves, because a lot of the time things make sense, but they don't really sound natural like they would use them. And so you would say, after saying something, like you've translated in English, you would say, ça se dit? Ça se dit? You don't really need to worry too much about the structure of this phrase and why it uses this pronoun se, but what helps me to understand pronominal verbs like this is if I change it from the active voice to the passive voice in my head, I get a more or less good translation in English. So ça se dit is logically in French, it says to itself, but a better translation is it is said, which is the passive voice. It is said by itself. In this case, is that word said? I would say I use this as much or even more now that I'm at a more advanced level than qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, which means what does it mean, which is a key phrase for learners. But ça se dit is when I say that after I've translated something new from English into French and I want to check if it's natural. And if it isn't, the person may give me a better way of saying what I've just said. So you just say, ça se dit? Ça se dit ça? And that's very French to add on a comma and ça afterwards as well. Ça se dit ça? And they go, oui, oui, ça se dit. The second use of se dire is to express the fact that you believe something is happening a certain way. So you can say in the past tense, je me disais. Oui, je me disais que on va à la soirée à 20h. Je me disais. So it was like a belief I had up until now, unless the person you're talking to is going to change that belief by correcting the time you're actually going. You would say, je me disais, that's what I was going to do. But both of these uses are obviously quite French in their nature. It's a reflexive verb. So they can sound quite unnatural and they're quite hard to use at the beginning, but the more you're exposed to it, the more you're around it, that gives you more confidence that it is actually a construction that is used in French, and you're going to have a lot of that come up for you throughout this list of 10 suggestions. So the first one is Sudhir. Number 2 is really easy to translate into English, and it is se demander. Se demander. Demander means to ask, and se demander means to ask oneself. And what is another way of saying to ask oneself? Well, it is to wonder. So you use it exactly the same way as in English. Je me demande si je peux acheter ça. I'm wondering if I can buy this. Or in the past tense, je me demandais si vous pouvez m'aider. In English, you'd use that. You'd use it in the past as well. I was wondering if you could help me. I was wondering if you can help me. So they use it exactly the same way. So number 2 is se demander. Number 3 is réfléchir, or specifically the way of forming it with the rest of the sentence, réfléchir à, to reflect about or reflect on something. They use this verb a hell of a lot more than we use reflect. We would use think more often, and our tone would suggest how deeply or how seriously we're going to think of a topic. But essentially it means to reflect on something, to give something more than a little bit of thought. So you're going to think about what you're going to do tomorrow. You're going to think about whether you're going to go to that event with your friends, whatever it is. You say je réfléchis à, and then the next verb. So je réfléchis à faire le ménage. But more often than not, you've already got the event or the action in your mind from the context of the conversation. So you would often hear the French say, j'y réfléchis, j'y réfléchis. And the I here is the Y, it's j'y réfléchis. And I'm not going to go into too big a detail about this because it's outside the scope of the video, but anything after an A in these situations is replaced by Y, the letter Y. So in this case, because réfléchir uses a after the conjugation, you need to replace whatever comes after with Y. So j'y réfléchis. Est-ce que tu viens au mariage? Je ne sais pas. J'y réfléchis. J'y réfléchis. The next one is similar in that it also uses the construction of the verb plus the a, and it is arriver. Arriver, I'm sure you know the verb arriver. In a lot of ways it can mean to arrive, and it's just like we would use it, but there are 2 specific ways I want to talk about now that are very French. The first of which being when you want to say to someone you're on your way, you've already left and you're on your way, or you won't be very long, you say j'arrive, j'arrive. So we might translate to say I arrive or I'm arriving. But it's more like I'm coming, I'm on my way. So at the beginning we all say, and I certainly did, je viens, but you don't hear that very often, so you start to think, what do they say for that? And it turns out they say j'arrive, j'arrive. The second use is arriver à. So just like réfléchir à, this construction needs the a with the accent after conjugating it. So if you say j'arrive à faire quelque chose, j'arrive à faire quelque chose, you mean to say you are managing to do it, you're able to do it. And I often hear this in the negative more than the positive, but that just might be my experience. You may have a problem doing something. Perhaps there's a lock that is fiddly. You know, sometimes you have a lock with a key and you need a knack to open it. You can tell the person, non, je n'y arrive pas, or they often drop the N and they say, non, j'y arrive pas, j'y arrive pas. And again, I'm putting that Y in there, j'y arrive pas, j'arrive pas. And that's what the French use to say whether they're managing or they're able to do something or not. And yeah, it can be hard to hear the Y sound because it's so fast that they'll be like, non, j'arrive pas, j'arrive pas. Very common, extremely common. And another way to say whether you're managing is you can say, je m'en sors, je m'en sors. But they're just two sides of the same coin. The next one is passer, passer. So a very common verb. Again, at its most basic level, it means to pass. There are a few ways to use it. But again, I want to talk briefly about two particular ways of using it. The most common is to say when you spend time doing something or spend time with someone, you say je passe du temps. Je passe du temps, I spend time. And you may have heard a French person who doesn't have an excellent level of English or just doesn't have this word in their locker. They may say, when they translate to English, they may say, I pass a lot of time to do the shopping. And that is because they say, je passe beaucoup de temps à faire mes courses. Je passe beaucoup de temps à faire mes courses. Because they use the infinitive for faire and we use the ing form. So we say, I spend a lot of time doing the shopping. They say, je passe beaucoup de temps à faire mes courses. So, passer plus à. So, je passe à, and then the infinitive means I spend time doing. And the second use of passer is something you can use either in the imperative or in the indicative form. You would say, je passe par là, ou je passe par ici, or je passe par cette rue-là. And it means I'm going that way. I go that way. To go home or whatever, you might tell someone I'm going that way. I commonly use it when I'm out with some friends and we're on our way back, and then we all go off gradually in different directions to our homes. Or you can give directions and use the imperative voice, and you say passez par là, passez par ici. Or obviously, if you know the person, passe par. It's informal. Okay, guys, so that's part 1 of 2. What did you think? Please let me know down in the comments. And of course, if you have any other examples of useful French verbs and expressions that you found, please let me know in the comments down below. But you never know, they may be discussed next week as well. If you enjoyed the video, please click on that like button, and to stay up to date with all the latest content, including to get notified when next week's video is posted, please click on subscribe to the channel. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. À la prochaine. Ciao.